Hello and welcome back. This is going to be Path of the Empress Step 15, and in going with our tarot theme, we're going to be using the Devil card as our inspiration for what we're talking about. Now, first and foremost, being that the Devil card is attached to Capricorn, my sun sign and my Venus sign, and I have a stellium in Capricorn too. For one thing, I very much resonate with how misunderstood this card is. It's actually often more misunderstood than the Death card or the Tower card, which is really funny. And a lot of that is between superstition and also what I've noticed is that we humans are very funny. We can say that we're made in the image of our creators, and yet we try to divorce ourselves from the aspects of that include the devil or our darknesses in there. And I'll do later on a little thing about embracing your darknesses, but even like no matter what religious path it is that you look into or that you follow or that you feel faithful to, there's always light and dark in all of the deities, whether they're the heroes or the villains or supreme beings or part of a pantheon. Like, they all have light and dark, and so do we. And I think that's part of why the Devil card and also our ego and things like that are widely misunderstood. And so what this first part of this step, like step 15A, is learning not to judge a book by its cover. And in part of that is learning to understand deeper layers of things. So like the Devil card in particular, it's not about, a lot of people see it and they just go, oh, it's the devil, right? Or I've noticed a fair amount of people will be in karmic energy and say that, like, oh, my DM or my DF is choosing the devil over me. For one thing, stop putting yourself on a pedestal and stop putting them on pedestals. You're not the angel and they're not the devil. We are all parts. And on top of that, the Devil card is not about like the devil in there. If you look at it, within the number 15 is the number 6. What card is that? The Lover's card. It's always there's a cycle in it. It always goes together. And the Devil card is just as much about those deeper vulnerabilities and intimacies as it is about toxicities and things of that nature. And they can often go hand in hand. And especially when it comes to twin flame unions, you're going to be exploring both. You cannot have one without the other. And until you face your fears and your shadows and stop making like assumptions based on something that you've been told, or even if something was a truth, that doesn't mean it needs to exist as a truth. What you believe is true. Like, you will spirit and your mind, because confirmation bias will bring it together to prove it to you. Like, so what you believe is true, and that can have an incredible impact on what you believe about things. Another thing that I love is I have a friend who's very devoutly Christian, and I love it because we can talk back and forth about the different connections that we see between our different spiritual paths. And she's a great divine feminine. And we got to talking one day about, like, so Abraham Hicks will talk about, like, most people's unhappiness when they're outside of their vortex or not in alignment is when they're not connected to source, to spirit, to creator, whatever you want to call it. And same thing with like Tony Robbins will talk about that with like being out of alignment with your blueprint, and Eckhart Tolle will talk about very similar things too. That's part of the power of now, like being in the presence, in the moment, being connected to your inner being, things like that. And we got to talking about how, like, for her, biblically speaking, sin is being disconnected from spirit. Well, for her, from God or Jesus, things like that. But it's a disconnection from spirit. And then I love it because all paths have something like that. The Wiccans, the pagans, the Buddhists, the Hindi, the Muslims, the Christians, like, everybody has something like that. And we may attach a name to it or an idol or something like that, or a deity, but it's all pretty much the same. When you are not connected with you, you are not connected with whatever your deities or supreme being is. You're not connected with the universe, and that's when you're unhappy. And most often, especially in twin flame unions or journeys, we will attach our happiness to our twin, which is part of the learning lessons in it. And then on top of that, we will make all sorts of judgments about our twins and their karmics, whether that's a romantic partner or work or family or things like that. And then we don't look at the reflection. Like, if they're being stubborn, so are you. If nothing else, in the fact that you are sitting there thinking about how stubborn they are being and going, well, I'm not being stubborn. They're the ones that did ABC. I'm just over here waiting for an apology, or I'm just over here waiting for them to fix their stuff. Or likewise, something just as stubborn could be, well, I don't care what people think. Yes, you do. Everybody cares what people think. Yes, there's a point in time when you can achieve a level of detachment where you realize that accusations are confessions, and that most people, when they are in the other dimension and mistreating you, they're actually in a state called projection, where it's not actually almost anything to do with you. And then you don't take it personally. You still care, but you don't take it personally. You don't carry it with you. It doesn't become a new wound in your heart chakra that you carry around all over the place with you. But in my experience, anybody who says, well, I don't care what other people think, and that includes number one here, because I used to say that all the time, you do. Yes, you do. And if you're saying it like that, it's kind of like when you say, I hate so-and-so. Well, in order to hate someone, you first have to love them. And the opposite of love is not hate. It's apathy. It's like no feelings whatsoever. The other side of the coin of love is hate. And that's often where we get caught up in things. That's what the devil card often reminds me of. Now, the devil card is also attached to Saturn, which is why it's related to Capricorn. And Saturn is like the great lord of karma, and it's about karmic lessons and looking at what is the bondage that we choose and the bondage that we release and things like that. And so I'm going to start out this first step with looking at judgment, right? Because that can often come in there. And also, it's important to note, in the devil card, both of the human characters in there, or the mostly human characters in there, they can release themselves. They can easily release themselves. Yes, they are chained in there, but they could come together and help each other get free. And there is fire nearby that they could heat up the chains with. And if you look at it, the devil character is not actually doing anything to them in it. He's just kind of this big figure in there. And depending on which spiritual path you look at, he can represent Pan, who has often been obscured in the Abrahamic religions to be the devil. But Pan is not actually the devil. He's a trickster god, yes, but he does just as much good as he does bad. And it is through us being brought into our darkness that we are able to reach the light. So, don't judge a book by its cover. Just because it's big and has horns and you might consider it ugly, or just because it might have brought you into a dark space, does not mean it is bad. And not all things in darkness are bad, just as not all things in light are good. So, this first step, or this first part of this step, what I want you to do is to make a couple of lists. The first your first lap of this lesson is to make a list about the ways that you have felt misunderstood, misrepresented, and judged. And I want you to go as far back as you can go. Like, think about when you were a little kid. Think about things that your parents and other, like, adult parental figures, could be babysitters, teachers, aunts, uncles, things like that in your life, grandparents, how you felt misunderstood by them and how they misjudged you. It could be by the way that you like the clothes that you wore, or it could be nothing. You could have done everything that they asked you to do, and yet they still misjudged you or misrepresented you or anything like that. 1:11 on the clock, right? This will be good for you to do. Then I want you to look at how you have misjudged other people, ways that you know for sure that you have misjudged them, or that you have misunderstood other people. And then I want you to go through and think and make a list of ways that you could have potentially misjudged people. And if you want, you can use you can make a specific list for your DM if you want, and also for any karmics that they've been mixed up with, because it's easy for us to get in our feelings, and when we're feeling hurt, to just go, oh yeah, they're the devil, or they're the toxicity, or even if they are toxic, to just go, well, they're toxic, they're horrible, then he shouldn't be with them, or I don't want to interact with them, or they've been mean to me. But really, when you stop and think about it, how do you think they got that way? And if you tell me that you don't care how they got that way, then you got some healing to do. I'm not suggesting that you get codependent and really like care about them, or that you release boundaries because you have empathy for them. But empathy is so important, especially in the divine feminine, divine masculine journey. Look at it. Why do you think they got that way? Do you think that they just were born and decided, I'm going to be a really toxic person and that's how I want to live my life? It's not likely. Their spirit may have chosen that sort of a path to experience, because like spirit doesn't have feelings. That's why the human experience exists. We have feelings. And so from spirit's perspective, all experience is experience. It's all like an amusement park, an adventure ride. It's all like, wow, look at this. Wow, I can be a bad person too. Like, look at that. So that's possible, but it's very unlikely. And in most cases with I mean, think about your own experience. Think of it like I think about mine, and like I've not always been this like kind divine feminine. I will say I feel like I've been kinder than a lot of people, but in my own ego, in my own spaces of insecurity and anxiety and judgment and feeling judged and things like that, I've certainly not been the kindest person. I've misjudged a lot of people, and I've created a lot of my own negative karma from that. But by going through and doing this and looking especially at karmics, yours, your, any that your DM have and things like that, you actually start to create good karma, and you start to be able to release that bondage within yourself. That there's a quote that's like, anger is a poison we drink hoping it will kill another person, or it will poison another person. Same thing with resentment, contempt, bitterness, cynicalness, things like that. This kind of thing can help you start to release that. And then start to notice with how you feel when you really start, like, go through those lists, really think about it, and then write out, especially when you're done with the list for yourself, of how the ways that you felt misrepresented and judged and misunderstood or unfairly punished for something that someone else has done, and write out some apologies to yourself. Some of them from yourself, and like just apologize to yourself for believing any of it. It's all bullshit, right? And then write some to yourself from the people who did those things, especially if they were a parent, and especially if you don't feel like you're going to be able to get said apologies from them, because there are sometimes you're not going to be able to get them in the 3D, but you can get them in the 5D. And so much in the same way that you connect with your masculine in the 5D, you can connect with other people in the 5D too. So go in and allow yourself to have those apologies and really accept them, really get to the place where you feel them. And I tell you what, when I learned how to do this, I had never, ever, ever had an apology from my father, ever. I mean, in my whole life. And then a couple of things happened, and I've had two. and even my mother, some of my family were like shocked. Right? This is a guy who doesn't apologize. He doesn't typically even act apologetic. He's not all bad, but apologies are not a thing that he typically does. And he's got an Aquarius rising, so it's not totally out of the realms of acceptability. But it was funny because I realized I was carrying a whole lot of hurts there, and a lot of them were attached to reasons that I was holding on to resentments with my masculine. It's funny, there's a song on the radio that says be kind, and it's 1:15, so that's a 7. Victory is not very far away when you decide to believe beautiful bullshit instead of hurtful bullshit. So do these exercises and come back and let us know how it went, so that other people can see what it was like for you, And as always, I love your questions, and thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, and just being you. I'll see you in the next video.